The wind carried dust across the barren plain, whispering through the rusted skeletons of factories that had once fed the city. Now only silence and the distant thunder of artillery remained. At the edge of this wasteland stood the outpost, a crumbling fortress of concrete and steel, its walls scarred by years of bombardment. Inside, soldiers moved like shadows, conserving their strength, waiting for orders that might never come. Among them was Captain Elias, a man whose face bore the lines of too many winters at war. He sat near the radio, listening to static, hoping for a voice that would break the monotony. Across the room, Lieutenant Mara adjusted the strap of her rifle, her eyes sharp, her movements precise. She had joined the unit only weeks ago, yet already her presence carried weight. The others respected her silence, sensing the discipline beneath it. Outside the walls, the land stretched endlessly, a graveyard of machines and men. Burnt-out tanks lay half-buried in the soil, their turrets pointing uselessly toward the horizon. The sky was heavy with smoke, turning the sunset into a blood-red smear. Every evening, Elias walked the perimeter, counting the mines, tracing the wire, reminding himself that survival depended on vigilance. That night, as the darkness settled, Mara approached him.
"Do you believe reinforcements will come?"
she asked quietly. Elias looked at her, then at the horizon where faint flashes marked distant battles. "Belief is all we have left," he replied. His voice carried no certainty, only the weary rhythm of a man who had seen promises dissolve into ash. The outpost was more than a fortress, it was a cage. Yet within its walls, a fragile bond was forming, one that would soon be tested by the storm gathering beyond the horizon. The morning began with a tremor that shook the outpost's walls, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. Mara was the first to reach the courtyard, scanning the horizon with her binoculars. A convoy had been ambushed in the valley below, its wreckage scattered across the road. Smoke rose in thick columns, and among the debris lay something unusual, a black metal case, half buried in the dirt, guarded by no one. Elias ordered a small team to retrieve it. The soldiers moved cautiously, weaving through the wreckage, rifles raised. The case was heavier than expected, its surface scarred but intact. They carried it back to the outpost, setting it on the table beneath the flickering light. No one spoke for a moment, the silence was thick with questions. When Mara pried it open, they found a device unlike anything they had seen before. Wires coiled around a central core, lights pulsed faintly, and a small screen displayed encrypted symbols. Elias recognized military code, but not from their side. "It's enemy tech," he muttered, tracing the patterns with his finger. "But why leave it behind?" The discovery unsettled the unit. Rumors spread quickly, some believed it was a weapon, others a communication tool. Mara studied it late into the night, her eyes reflecting the glow of the screen. She noticed the symbols shifted every hour, as if responding to signals from far away. "It's alive," she whispered, though she knew machines did not breathe. By dawn, the outpost had changed. The soldiers no longer spoke of reinforcements or supplies, their thoughts revolved around the black box. It was a mystery, a burden, and perhaps a key to survival. Elias felt the weight of command pressing harder than ever. He knew the device would draw attention, and attention in war was rarely a blessing. The outpost awoke to the sound of mortars. The first shells landed beyond the wire, shaking the ground, sending fragments of stone into the air. Soldiers scrambled to their positions, rifles clutched tight, hearts pounding. Elias barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Mara was already on the wall, scanning the valley where shadows moved like a tide. The enemy came fast, their silhouettes darting between wreckage and smoke. Machine guns roared from the towers, stitching lines of fire across the plain. Yet the attackers pressed forward, relentless, driven by something more than orders. Elias recognized the pattern, they were probing, testing defenses, searching for weakness. He had seen it before, and he knew it was only the beginning. Mara fired steadily, her shots precise, each one dropping a figure in the dust. She felt no triumph, only the rhythm of survival. Around her, comrades shouted, cursed, prayed. The outpost was alive with fury, its walls trembling under the assault. For hours, the battle raged, until the attackers finally withdrew, leaving behind bodies and silence. But victory was hollow. The black box had pulsed brighter during the attack, its symbols shifting faster, as if feeding on the violence. Mara noticed it immediately, her stomach tightening. "It reacts to them," she told Elias, pointing at the screen. He stared at the device, unease settling in his chest. "Then they know we have it," he replied grimly. That night, the soldiers buried their dead in shallow graves beyond the wire. The wind carried the scent of smoke and blood, mingling with the whispers of the fallen. Elias stood over the graves, his hands clenched, his mind heavy with doubt. The outpost had survived the first assault, but he knew the enemy would return. And next time, they would not come to test, they would come to claim. The outpost had endured the assault, but the silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Soldiers whispered in corners, their eyes darting toward the black box as if it were a curse. Elias tried to keep discipline, yet he felt the cracks widening. Fear was not the enemy's only weapon, suspicion was sharper. One evening, Mara discovered Corporal Vance near the radio, speaking in hushed tones. His words were not in their language, but in the clipped cadence of the enemy. She froze, listening, her pulse racing. When he noticed her, his face turned pale, and he stammered excuses. But Mara had heard enough. She dragged him before Elias, demanding answers. Under interrogation, Vance confessed. He had been feeding information to the enemy for weeks, promising them details in exchange for safe passage when the outpost fell. His betrayal explained the precision of the assault, the uncanny timing of their attacks. Elias felt rage burn inside him, but more than rage, sorrow. Vance had fought beside them, shared their rations, buried their dead. And yet, he had chosen survival over loyalty. The soldiers demanded justice. Some cried for execution, others for exile. Elias stood torn, knowing that whatever choice he made would scar the unit. In the end, he ordered Vance locked in the storage bunker, guarded day and night. "We will decide his fate when dawn comes," Elias said, though his voice carried no conviction. That night, Mara sat alone, staring at the black box. Its symbols pulsed brighter, as if mocking them. Betrayal had seeped into their ranks, and the device seemed to feed on it. She wondered if it was not merely a machine, but a mirror reflecting the darkness within. Outside, the wind howled across the plain, carrying with it the promise of another storm. The enemy returned with fury. At dawn, the valley filled with armored vehicles, their engines growling like beasts. Artillery thundered, shaking the outpost's foundations. The soldiers braced themselves, knowing this was no probing attack, it was a siege. Elias ordered every man to the walls. Machine guns rattled, mortars fired, and the air became a storm of smoke and steel. Mara moved with precision, directing squads, reinforcing weak points, her voice steady even as the ground trembled beneath her boots. The black box pulsed violently, its symbols flashing in rhythm with the bombardment, as if it were orchestrating the chaos outside. Hours stretched into days. The enemy encircled the outpost, cutting off supply lines, severing communication. Hunger gnawed at the soldiers, exhaustion dulled their senses. Yet they fought on, driven by desperation and the fragile hope that reinforcements might still arrive. Elias walked the perimeter each night, his eyes hollow, his body weary, but his resolve unbroken. Inside the bunker, Vance pleaded for release, claiming he could negotiate with the enemy, that he knew their codes, their weaknesses. Elias refused, though doubt lingered in his mind. Mara warned him, trusting a traitor is surrender. Elias nodded, but he could not silence the thought that perhaps betrayal was their only chance at survival. On the fifth night, the enemy launched a full assault. Waves of soldiers stormed the wire, explosions tore through the towers, and the outpost shook as if the earth itself rebelled. Mara fought fiercely, her rifle blazing, her determination unyielding. Elias rallied his men, shouting above the roar, refusing to let despair claim them. When dawn broke, the outpost still stood, though barely. Its walls were shattered, its defenders wounded, its spirit frayed. The siege had not ended, it had only begun. And within the heart of the fortress, the black box glowed brighter than ever, a silent promise of trials yet to come. The siege dragged on, grinding the soldiers down to bone and spirit. Ammunition dwindled, rations turned to crumbs, and the wounded filled the infirmary with groans that echoed through the halls. Elias knew the outpost could not withstand another week. Survival demanded a choice: stay and die, or risk escape. Late one night, he gathered Mara and a handful of trusted soldiers in the command room. The black box sat on the table, its glow steady, almost watchful. Elias spread a map across the surface, tracing a route through the valley toward the river. "If we move under cover of darkness, we might break through their lines," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the weight of desperation. Mara studied the map, her jaw tight. "It's suicide," she replied. "They'll expect movement. The siege is designed to trap us." Elias nodded, but pointed to a narrow canyon marked in faded ink. "This path is forgotten. If we move fast, we can reach the river and signal for extraction." The soldiers debated, fear clashing with hope. Some argued to hold the outpost, others to trust the plan. In the end, Elias made the decision. "We leave tomorrow night," he declared. "Those who stay will guard the wounded. Those who go must carry the black box. If it is truly the enemy's prize, then we cannot let it fall into their hands." Mara volunteered to lead the escape team. Her resolve was iron, her loyalty unquestioned. Elias placed the black box in her pack, his hand lingering as if reluctant to let it go. "Guard it with your life," he whispered. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I will." As dawn broke, the outpost stood silent, its defenders preparing for the gamble that might save them, or doom them all. The black box pulsed faintly, as though it knew the path ahead was lined with shadows. Night fell heavy over the valley, cloaking the escape team in shadows. Mara led the way, her pack weighed down by the black box, its faint glow hidden beneath layers of cloth. Behind her, Elias and a dozen soldiers moved silently, their boots sinking into the dust, their breaths shallow with fear. Every sound seemed louder in the silence: the creak of leather, the click of a rifle, the distant howl of wind. The canyon path was narrow, its walls jagged, forcing them into single file. Twice they froze as flares lit the sky, enemy patrols sweeping the ridges above. Mara signaled for silence, her hand raised, her eyes fixed on the horizon. When the light faded, they pressed forward, hearts pounding. Hours later, they reached the river. Its waters churned black beneath the moon, swollen from spring rains, swift and merciless. Crossing it would be perilous, but beyond lay freedom, or at least distance from the siege. Elias ordered rafts assembled from scavenged planks and barrels. The soldiers worked quickly, their hands trembling, their eyes darting toward the shadows. As they prepared to launch, gunfire erupted from the cliffs. The enemy had found them. Bullets tore through the night, splintering wood, striking stone. Mara shouted commands, returning fire, her voice fierce against the chaos. Elias pushed the first raft into the current, urging his men aboard. The river swallowed them, dragging the raft downstream, spinning it wildly. Mara leapt onto the second raft, clutching the black box. The device pulsed violently, its symbols flashing like a heartbeat. She felt its weight not only in her pack but in her soul, as if it demanded to be carried across. Elias followed, firing into the darkness as the raft lurched forward. The river roared, carrying them into the unknown. Behind them, the cliffs burned with gunfire. Ahead, only shadows waited. The crossing had begun, and survival balanced on the edge of the current. The river carried them far from the outpost, but not far enough from war. By dawn, the survivors stumbled onto the opposite bank, soaked, exhausted, and bleeding. The black box pulsed faintly in Mara's pack, its glow dimmer now, as if conserving strength. Elias looked at his men, fewer than half remained, and knew their journey was not escape, but a march toward destiny. They pressed onward through the forest, branches clawing at their uniforms, mud clinging to their boots. Behind them, the enemy pursued, relentless, drawn by the signal of the device. Every hour, the black box grew brighter, its symbols shifting faster, until Mara realized it was guiding them. "It wants us to go somewhere," she whispered, though the thought chilled her. By nightfall, they reached a ruined cathedral on the edge of the forest. Its spires were broken, its walls scarred, yet within its hollow nave stood a terminal, ancient, rusted, but alive. The black box pulsed violently, demanding to be connected. Elias hesitated, fear gnawing at him. "What if it's a weapon?" he asked. Mara met his gaze. "Then let it be our weapon." The enemy arrived before dawn, encircling the cathedral. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the shattered halls. The soldiers fought with the last of their strength, holding the line as Mara carried the black box to the terminal. She connected the wires, and the device screamed to life, flooding the cathedral with light. Symbols cascaded across the walls, and the enemy faltered, blinded, disoriented. Elias rallied his men, driving the attackers back step by step. Mara felt the device burn in her hands, its energy consuming her, but she did not let go. With a final surge, the black box unleashed a wave that shattered the battlefield, silencing guns, scattering soldiers. When the light faded, only silence remained. The cathedral stood in ruins, the black box dark and lifeless. Elias found Mara collapsed beside it, her breath shallow, her eyes closed. He knelt, whisper,